Come to Universal Studios in Orlando, the only place on Earth where you can ride the movies.
The catchphrase of Universal Studios Florida, "Ride the Movies," was a huge selling point in the early 90s, with rides like Jaws, Confrontation, Back to the Future, and E.T. But as years passed, the quest to stay relevant in their heated rivalry with neighboring theme parks saw them take a slight detour, one that led them into the eye of the storm. Today, we discuss one of my personal favorite defunct attractions.
You'll know what it's like to look a tornado right in the eye and survive.
This is the history of Twister. Ride it out. The mid-90s was an odd time for film. We saw the uprising of the thriller genre, with so many blockbuster movies centered around some type of catastrophic event. Jurassic Park, Titanic, Armageddon, Backdraft, and Twister, a disaster thriller film released on May 10th of 1996.
Scientists have been studying tornadoes forever, but still nobody knows how a tornado works.
We have touchdown, tornado is on the ground.
It's the wonder of nature, baby!
This was one of those movies that helped revolutionize the film industry, both in special effects and earning potential. With a budget of $92 million and grossing $495 million worldwide, Twister was the second highest grossing film of 1996, only losing out to another disaster thriller, Independence Day. By 1996, Universal Studios Florida was already in its 6th year of operation and had yet to see a major addition to the park beyond its planned opening attractions. Although Back to the Future did open a year after the park, that was already announced when the park opened. After seeing the success of special effects shows like Earthquake the Big One, an attraction that took guests through the process of creating practical and digital movie magic, Universal was considering the replacement of the soon-to-be closing Ghostbusters Spooktacular, a Ghostbusters-themed stage show that opened with Universal Studios Florida in 1990. Why they chose to replace this beats me. Maybe because the park already had 3 other stage shows, but this one did seem to be the coolest if you ask me. I'm sure we'll be covering this at some point in a future video. With the timeliness of Twister's box office success and the fact that it was a Universal/Amblin Entertainment production made perfect sense. Amblin Entertainment, after all, was Steven Spielberg's production company, and considering his heavy involvement in much of the park's opening day attractions, it was a no-brainer. This would also cut costs for Universal because Ghostbusters, an intellectual property owned by Columbia Pictures and Sony, had to be licensed out for theme park use. After its closure in November of 1996, Universal Studios would announce the building's future plans just 3 months later. Scheduled to open for the spring of 1998 season, construction for the now-named Twister Ride It Out began in February of 1997. While retrofitting an existing soundstage to fit a new attraction was going to take some time, that was the easy part. Their goal of creating a 5-story tall indoor tornado, that would be a whirlwind of a feat to pull off. The plot of the film Twister followed 2 storm-chasing meteorologists portrayed by Bill Paxton and Helen Hunt, who are on the brink of divorce but must work together to create an advanced weather alert system by putting themselves in the crosshairs of extremely violent tornadoes. When it came to planning the special effects attraction, putting guests inside of a tornado was kind of the goal. In a safe way, that is. In order to do so, they needed a massive amount of indoor space, which is probably why they chose the former Ghostbusters show building. The space itself that housed Twister Ride It Out was a soundstage that bordered the production central and New York area of the park. The building would see major changes both inside and out. Since the park's opening, the exterior had this half soundstage, half New York street look to it, with the main facade resembling the Metropolis Tribune, a generic fictional newspaper publication and building within the Universal Studios Florida lore. Oh, and how could I forget, Firehouse Hook and Ladder Company 8, a real-life building that exists in New York City that was home base for the Ghostbusters in the film franchise. Of course, this was recreated at a smaller scale for the theme park. This was where the entrance entrance for the old Ghostbusters attraction was. But for the Twister special effects show, rather than use that same entrance and likely have to retheme that building facade, during the planning for the attraction, the entrance was relocated from the far right side of the soundstage to closer to the center. Not only creating a more obvious entrance for the attraction since it would be closer to the park's entrance and facing the walkway, but this also created more space in the New York/Ghostbusters themed back corner of the park where they would host a Ghostbusters street show. Originally running from 1991 to 1993 under the name Street Busters and featured Beetlejuice, weirdly, would then return later as Extreme Ghostbusters The Great Frightway and run from 2002 till 2005. With the entrance now moved away from the back corner of New York, it freed up the space for more creative decor that reflected the Twister movie. I will say, certainly it was not the most jaw-dropping facade for a ride, but it maintained the same feel as most other entrances for Production Central attractions at the time and threw a few tractors in there, as this once pristine soundstage looked as if a nearby tornado had hurled a tractor into the outside wall, as well as electric poles, a windmill, and a street sign that was strangely from the corner of Attraction and Entrance Street. What are the odds? A lot of the weathering and theming was added after the attraction's opening, at some point in the early 2000s when the sound stages were switched from the iconic light blue color, which you could actually still find over at ET Adventure, to the yellow/orange/brown color scheme. Another iconic part of the exterior was the massive Twister billboard. Themed after the poster from the movie, this sign was also very weathered by the storm and sat above the ride's exit gift shop named Aftermath, which always did confuse me growing up. Like, I thought the ride was called Twister Aftermath, especially because when you enter the park, this would make sense to be the entrance and not the exit. When entering the line, guests would first walk into a production area, equipped with production lights, a garage door with an imprint of a cow on it, chairs from producer Steven Spielberg, as well as Helen Hunt and Bill Paxton, a collapsed billboard featuring a familiar meteorologist, a sign welcoming you to the town of Waukeeta, Oklahoma, where the film takes place, as well as Dorothy, the tornado instrument used to study the inside of these storms from the movie. There was also an outdoor extended queue section that was used on busier days that included a few vehicles seen in the film, the most notable of which was the Barn Burner, a Muskogee State College bus that was converted into a storm-chasing vehicle. This is also where you'd be able to hear 91.1 WNDI, a fictional radio station that would act as the soundtrack for the queue. Hosted by Mike and Jessica, the storm chasers of rock and roll. This acted as a great storytelling tool to introduce the guests to the world they were about to enter. See, it's little creative touches like this that really set attractions apart from others. Like, they could have easily just had the soundtrack of the film playing on an endless loop. Although, an attempt at world building like this is a little strange considering it's very much a hot set type theme to the attraction as a whole. But I do really love the blurring of lines. I just wish they had the raw audio from the radio show uploaded somewhere. Oh, and one more thing. There were screens above this area of the line that would play home video recordings of real-life tornadoes. Tornadoes that destroyed homes, ruined, and more than likely took the lives of real people. Now obviously, the ride is about tornadoes, and that's the nature of the storms. But they could have easily been playing clips from the movie where in the filming process, 0 lives were lost, but I don't know, that's just me. Once entering the main show building, you would find the very first pre-show. Following the opening scene from the film, the two stars Bill Paxton and Helen Hunt would proceed to set up guests for the special effects display they were about to witness.
At the same time, a tornado is one of the most awe-inspiring sights one can witness in nature.
The peculiar thing about this pre-show that you may have noticed is that each of the actors has their own screen, but are right next to each other. This is likely because it's said that during the filming of the original Twister film, they grew a hatred for each other and refused to be near, let alone on screen with one another. I do believe this because it's very difficult to find even one promotional interview they did together leading up to the release of the film. And considering the two projection screens are right next to one another, there shouldn't be any other reason for this.
Gather up your family and all your belongings.
And join us on the stage and see for yourself just how powerful a Twister can be.
After the conclusion of the video, you would move on to the recreation of Aunt Meg's damaged home from the film. This would technically be considered the second pre-show because there is another video that plays in here. but it's much shorter and really feels like they're just killing time for the show to reset for the next group. If you weren't interested in watching more clips from the film and decided to distract yourself among the wreckage, you might just find a hidden Mickey. Yes, you heard me right, there was a hidden Mickey inside of the Twister queue. On the ceiling, you would find a front end of a car that had smashed through the roof. A car whose front wheel was still spinning, and on that spinning wheel, you would be able to find a pair of Mickey ears, as if the car had run them over before getting picked up by the storm. Oddly enough, this wasn't the first time Universal had done this. In a much more prominent spot, actually on a ride, Jurassic Park River Adventure at Universal Hollywood and Islands of Adventure, where in the water you'd be able to find a similar pair of ears. Unfortunately, this has since been removed from both versions of the ride. With one last ominous warning, you move on to the main event.
By the end, there's only one thing you can do. Hold on for your life.
As you would enter the main showroom, guests would choose between 3 rows of tiered viewing platforms. Yes, this was a standing room only show, which may seem odd if you're familiar with standard theme park shows, but is actually standard for most special effects shows like this one. By this point, if you or anyone in your party was not wanting to participate in the demonstration, you could easily just walk to the end of the rows and use the exit doors. Although I do remember this happening fairly often. After all, one of the pre-shows depicted 2 characters strapping themselves to a pipe as a tornado devoured the house around them. I'm just glad younger me was cognizant enough to realize that I was in a theme park and totally safe. Once it was clear that kids chickening out of the experience was a common occurrence, Twister Ride It Out became the first Universal Studios Florida attraction to include a PG-13 rating, with a warning sign outside the attraction's entrance with a PG-13 at the top, along with the standard heart, back, and neck problem warnings. Although I can't guarantee that this was the only time that it happened, but I just can't find any evidence of it online. The show itself was extremely impressive. Universal Creative worked alongside tornado meteorologists to learn the ins and outs of the science behind the monster storms, as well as the sensory aspect of being inside a tornado.
Wow, that was a close one. Hi, I'm Mike Hightower, and I'm standing in the middle of Twister Ride It Out. Have you ever wondered how we could create a 5-story tornado inside a building? After studying the physics of vortices, we designed and installed an array of large fans, strategically placed to imitate Mother Nature at her worst. Starting with an empty building, we had to continually readjust the wind patterns, because every time we added a new set piece, the dynamics of the tornado would change. Once the set was finished, we realized we still needed to see how the wind patterns would work with a real audience. So, we brought in 240 mannequins to stand in for the final stages of testing.
Universal themselves boasts that the attraction features over 50 special effects on display. Things as simple as a lighting cue inside of a diner to mimic someone inside with a flashlight after the power goes out. Projections of a tornado in the distance appearing behind a drive-in movie theater before it's torn to shreds by the storm. A truck that slides into a gas pump, creating sparks that follow the leaking fuel before exploding into a burst of flames. Before a massive indoor funnel cloud forms in the show's finale. And probably the most iconic part, a cow flies from one side of the soundstage to the other. Taking a look at the concept art for the show really puts into perspective the amount of planning and thought that went into making this vision a reality. As you could see from the layout, not only does the theater for the show nearly double the size of the rest of the building, but also there's not a whole lot of backstage area for the set to just disappear to. So each set piece that was destroyed by the storm had to be meticulously planned out before construction began. Even the mechanism that controlled the flying cow. Every great theme park show has to have a fun little stinger at the end, right? After the final explosion, guests, while standing, would feel a sudden drop of about 3 inches. This effect was achieved by slowly raising the tiered rows by using an air hydraulic system during the 2 to 3 minute duration of the show. This was a big shock to a lot of guests because it's not something you'd expect on a non-ride. I guess the name is Ride It Out, so that tiny little drop does classify it as a ride now, doesn't it? Guests would then file out of the room as all of the effects would one by one slowly reset for the next show. I will say, after just now rewatching the film, they did a wonderful job at matching the show to this exact scene from the movie. Watching this kind of felt like the scene was specifically written in so that the ride could recreate it. I mean, this is definitely not the case, but watching these two side by side is really cool. Originally, Twister Ride It Out had a planned opening of March 1998, but after a series of tragic events, the decision was made to postpone the attraction's debut. In February of 1998, a series of tornadoes devastated Kissimmee, Florida, just minutes from Universal Studios. This massive storm lasted over 24 hours, with 15 confirmed touchdowns and had a maximum rating of F3. Tragically, 42 lives were lost in these horrific events, as well as 259 reported injuries, and it caused $107 million in damages. It was because of this that the opening of the Twister attraction was delayed, as it should have. On top of that, Universal donated $100,000 to the victims of these tornadoes. This was obviously a massive blow to the promotional efforts of the new attraction, as well as a PR nightmare to handle. But also, what could they have done at this point? The show served as a great educational tool for both the amazing practical effects used in movies and how devastating tornadoes can be. The timing was just very unfortunate. But once the dust settled and it came time to promote the new attraction at Universal Studios Florida in the summer of '98, Universal went all out with a big budget cinematic trailer.
New Twister. It's gonna blow you away. Only at Universal Studios Florida. Come ride it out.
With a reported cost of $16 million and a construction time of just 18 months, Twister Ride It Out opened to the public on May 4th of 1998.
Considering how long some attractions take to build today, that's actually an outstanding timeline. And from all reports, it seemed to have opened to some great fan reception.
I think the under 2-year turnaround from movie release date to ride opening likely helped with that. Other than the building seeing some minor updates that we had mentioned before, the attraction mostly remained the same throughout its entire run. Of course, the gift shop saw some rotating merchandise. Some of my favorites include these cool purple tie-dyed shirts, this really interesting Twister sipper, and of course, cows. Cows everywhere. Twister Ride It Out was open for an amazing 17-year run, smashing the run of its predecessor, Ghostbusters Spooktacular, which only ran 6 years, by over a decade. In a surprising turn of events, Race Through New York starring Jimmy Fallon would be announced live on The Tonight Show in October of 2015.
In 2017, we're going to have our very own ride at Universal Orlando Resort. Now this is seriously, this is real. It's called Race Through New York starring Jimmy Fallon. That's what we're going to do. This is the real deal. I mean, this is real deal.
Leaving many Universal Parks fans questioning where this attraction might go. At this point, Jimmy Fallon had only been the host of The Tonight Show for just over a year, and considering NBC's track record with hosts, yes, I am still mad about that whole Conan thing, this was a big move. I say a surprising turn of events because Universal's slogan was "Ride the Movies." Although Jimmy Fallon has had his fair share of cameos in film, he was not by any means a movie star.
To better help understand this strange decision, you'd have to look at what happened to the corporate structure of Universal just 4 years prior.
In January of 2011, Comcast, the cable company, purchased 51% of Universal, and thereby gaining control of the newly formed NBC Universal. Seeing that they likely wanted representation of their own cable-based assets within the parks, it seems that Comcast pushed for The Tonight Show to fit in somewhere. I don't know if this was the best decision, but it happened, and on November 2nd of 2015, Twister Ride It Out closed forever. This not only marked the end of one special effects show, but around this time, so many other theme park shows just like this one were closing their doors for good. Backdraft, a similar show to Twister, just based off of the 1991 disaster thriller Backdraft, which actually had a huge lasting impact on me as a kid, closed at Universal Hollywood in 2009 to make way for Transformers the Ride, and Backdraft at Universal Japan closed in 2020. Disaster, a major motion picture ride starring You, would close just 2 months prior to Twister and would be replaced by Fast and the Furious Supercharged. Who could forget Armageddon, Les Effects I can't say this, at Walt Disney Studios in Disneyland Paris, ending its 17-year run to make room for Avengers Campus, and the special effects show at Universal Hollywood that closed alongside Animal Actors in 2023 to make room for a Fast and the Furious themed roller coaster.
To this day, some of the only special effects shows to exist at major parks are at the international Universal parks.
Lights, Camera, Action, hosted by Steven Spielberg, still exists at Universal Singapore and was one of the opening day attractions at Universal Beijing in 2021. The saddest part about the closure of these special effects shows is that they happened during a not so great time in Universal parks. I'd like to refer to this as the screen era. Yes, Universal had been incorporating screens for a long time by this point, with rides like Spider-Man and Back to the Future. But they went heavy with screens in the 2010s. And as I mentioned, a ton of these shows were replaced with screen rides. Luckily, it seems like Universal has moved out of their screen era and into a time where screens are no longer the main event, just a flourish that adds to the immersive experiences that these parks are known for today.
Although Twister Ride It Out might be gone forever, there still are a few remnants or Easter eggs you might be able to find sprinkled throughout the park.
Just to the right of the Race Through New York entrance marquee, you'll find a window themed after an old-time newspaper. Inside of that window, you'll be able to see a very sun-faded light blue shirt just like the one Bill Paxton wore in the Twister pre-show video, along with 2 leather straps like the ones used in the film's finale. There have been other references to Twister at past Universal tribute stores. If you don't happen to know, these tribute stores are temporary retail locations that change seasonally, and there's about 4 a year. At the time of recording, you could actually find one at the tribute store that's open right now. If you look closely at the bulletin board, just outside of the entrance, you'll find a flyer that reads, "Welcome to Wakita, Twister Safety Rules." Of course, Wakita being the town that the attraction and movie take place in. It would be another 9 years before Universal would do anything major with the Twister intellectual property. In July of 2024, Twisters, a sequel to the original film, was released in theaters.
You know, that's why I decided now would be a great time to cover this topic, because Twisters is releasing in just a few days. No, I'm not here to see Despicable Me 4. I'm camping out. I can't wait for the new movie. This is gonna be a good one.
Thank you so much to all of the Pity viewers over on Patreon. If you're looking for more behind the scenes content and tons of exclusive vlogs, you can join all of these really cool people over there. You all help support this channel more than you can imagine.
If this video tickled your fancy and you're interested in seeing more, how about this one over here? Or this one's really great too. Definitely click on that one. Just so I know you made it all the way to the end of this video, please let me know in the comment section down below what your favorite defunct Universal attraction of all time is. It's really the only way I know you made it to the end. I am Ryan. This has been For the Love of Theme Parks. Thank you. Catch you guys real soon. Bye.